The team's gotta do their part to help a certain someone get his red skull on in order to preserve history. But, what the hell? Who cares about those time rules anyway, right? Plus, May is... Actually, I have no idea what May's doing. So it's kind of... On this week's Agents of S.P.O.I.L.E., Season 7, Episode 2. Know Your Onions. Hey everyone, D here, and welcome to this week's review of Agents of S.P.O.I.L.E. So yes, of course, spoilers coming your way. And as usual, do want to remind you about our quick jump index system. Right in the description below, we'll have this entire review titleized, time-stamped, broken down into easily digestible chunks. So you can watch the end of the review first. You can watch the beginning last. You can watch this review in any order you'd like. Alright, so before we jump into the review, how you guys doing? It has been a monumental week. The protests regarding the death of George Floyd have been ever-present, have been nightly, have been led by peaceful protesters that have, unfortunately, devolved due to what I believe to be a lot of insurgent, chaotic elements trying to disrupt and undercut a movement that needs to be heard. However you feel about the issue, we're talking about other human beings that have been systemically treated poorly. I can only relate so much because of who I am, but because of the people I know, and the fact that I do have a heart and empathy and I can connect with other people, I will use whatever format that I have in order to help spread that message. So I might get into it a little bit later on in this, but for now, very briefly, just be safe out there, join together, be sure to have your voices heard, be safe, and please keep your cameras on. Show the world, have history of what a peaceful protest is like, what your voices want to say, and more importantly, record the opposition that comes against you and tries to infiltrate and tries to create chaos in the midst of people at this stage all over the world supporting to get some important change established systemically in this system. So, be safe out there, and we hear you, and we're with you. All right, so let's jump back into 1931 with the worst transition possible that I can do there. Into the second part of our trip back in time, wrapping up our 1930s chronicle very quickly with this week's episode. It was a fine episode. It was very standardized. I mean, there was nothing wrong with the episode. It worked itself out, but it was in some ways very formulaic, and maybe this is a fear that I might have with this time traveling for spending such short periods of time in each time period. Because we spent last week kind of setting up the rules of time travel, ripples, not waves, being careful, finding out what the story is, where everybody's going, and then with this week's episode, especially having a quite literal countdown, it was just get elements, wrap it up, have our discussion of whether or not we can change history, but ultimately knowing that we can't because you can't stick around. Elements have to be changed. So there, in some ways, because of the setup, there wasn't a whole lot of actual tension in the episode. We always knew that Freddy was going to cross that line and go over history is how it is. To succeed, this is what they have to do. Any change would only play into the Chronicom's hands. So any of the debates that they had about the time travel, any worries about was Freddy going to survive or not, all of those ended up being, again, kind of without tension, much like the Enoch-May fight. We knew neither one of them were really going to lose. Enoch's not going to die. May's not going to get knocked out. It was a fight without tension. Exciting, fun, but there wasn't anything there. And unfortunately, that's sort of how the episode ultimately felt out. It was a fun adventure. It was nice. It was good to see all of these pieces played out. But ultimately, it was... We've got Mac and Deke with Freddy, and they've got to get caught up, and we have radio communication in order to cause the tension and the difference there, and why we can't have this big communication. We can have these little inner stories. We've got, of course, Koenig easily placing out why he becomes an important person involved in with S.H.I.E.L.D., as we still see at the end. And then, of course, May doing, like I said, whatever it is that they're trying to fill in for storyline for May this year, which I don't really like. So, like I said, fun episode, nice, nothing really wrong with it, but also very rote. And Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. does some really great writing. They do some really great, intricate storytelling. And just because of the setup they had here, it was all just get A to B to C and get it done. And it's just kind of a bummer. Alright, so the basis of the episode is, of course, Freddy is in charge with transporting an early version of what we were guessing last week, the Super Soldier Serum. Not the final product, the one that is perfected and gets into Steve Rogers. No, this is an earlier model, the one that goes into Johann Schmidt, that makes him into the Red Skull. So, kind of works, some side effects. But of course, by transporting it, this is what gets Malik in with Hydra, gets him set up so that he becomes the big important person that passes on to his son Gideon, and eventually causes all of the Hydra S.H.I.E.L.D. Fiascos that we are also very well familiar with. So yeah, basically... only job is make sure that this happens. Chronicons know if they stop this, they stop the Red Skull from being formed. That stops Hydra from being formed, stops Hydra from being formed, stops S.H.I.E.L.D. from being formed in response to him. Also, the whole Captain America Super Soldier Serum thing goes probably, and a lot of changes. Which gets down to the really larger discussion that, unfortunately, this episode really just flies in the face of last episode is... time travel rules, what are those? Basically. Last week we were talking very much about Deke bringing up the, multiple worlds theorem and the time stream idea, the whole ripples, now waves. That's what Mac was basically saying throughout last episode. And this episode, they really just completely throw that to the side. Conversations are had right out in the open without even trying to censor themselves. I mean, Koenig just exposed the whole time travel talk and future and Hydra and everything. Mac and Deke, same thing. The radio's being used pretty much right out in front of everyone. And then being countered with... it just... For trying not to cause a whole lot of waves, there were quite a few cannonballs going on just in the basic discussions. Not to mention the whole idea of, why don't we just take out Malik here and stop everything that goes down? First off, that's what the enemy is doing, the Chronocops. Like it? Like that? Yeah, I thought it was funny. That falls exactly into their plan. That's what they want to do. Why would you even consider doing that? Yeah, sure, it can change some things, but much like Coulson says straight up to that is, you have no idea something worse could come out. In fact, maybe that worse is what the Chronocoms want to happen. So, small changes actually can have huge effects. There was a great PBS series years ago. You can get some of the episodes, I think, on DVD now or on streaming and stuff, called Connections. And some of the later seasons I don't think were quite as good. But the first season especially, the second season, really dealt with the idea of these connections from an idea that allowed things to happen. And how these can be such things as just two strangers meeting on a train, happening to strike up a conversation, and the two of them, one's a scientist for this, and one's a scientist for this, and because of that conversation, 2 years later, somebody writes a paper, and that becomes the basis of atomic theory, or something along those lines. How it's not only the big actions, how it can be very small actions. You know, if you make that right instead of left, that could be the difference between, you know, salvation and damnation in sort of a butterfly effect sort of way. So, yes, you have to be careful. I mean, the self-correcting ripples would be sort of nice. It's sort of a good idea, but really, even these small changes can have giant effects. And again, just stopping Freddy from making this delivery ends up having a huge ripple effect down the road. So, not good to change things. Really, really bad to go and try and shift stuff around, especially something as large and traumatic and gigantic in effect of that. So, while I appreciate there was at least an attempt to deal with the idea of what do we do if we change time, it was so rushed and thrown out there. There wasn't really any kind of, you know, meat that could be taken off of that bone. There wasn't a whole lot of meal happening there. And ultimately, like I said, because we knew things had to end up in a certain way, it undercut a lot of the tension I think that those discussions were trying to have. Was Deke going to shoot? Well, no. Though I did like the fact that Deke's like, I'm under orders, and Mac's like, what are you talking about? I'm the one that gives the orders. I'm the boss. You gotta listen to Mac. He's big, so there's lots of reasons to listen to Mac. So I appreciate that at least Deke finally did do that. But yeah, don't change time. You have no idea how things could really completely alter, and not always for the best. Also, the whole baby Hitler discussion that goes on, yeah, they sort of did touch on that with Koenig's statement is you can't blame someone for something they haven't done yet. Maybe the actions that you do is what causes them to become what they are. So that's why it says any interaction you can actually, in attempting to prevent the thing that you want to happen, you can actually make that happen. So, again, time travel. It's complicated. All right, I do want to talk about May for a minute, because the way they ended things last week was really curious where they were going with the whole, you know, Batman. Actually, someone gave me the perfect analogy. Black Widow. There's like a Black Widow spider up there. Perfect Marvel reference! And I totally missed it. I'm not proud of myself for that. But there was really such sort of a tension of what is going on with May. And I don't really like what they're doing with her. I mean, look, the whole Phil's back and the whole Phil May relationship, yeah, that's kind of complicated. But again, dealing with those complications of loss and return and things like that, again, there's some meat that you can actually really get into, especially with some really well-established characters. Especially how they kick things off with Phil going through this whole kind of, what's happening, I don't want to be here, but I'm here, but, you know, that whole kind of complexity, I think they've really worked that out well. Having May just sort of be this emotionally blank return, I don't know, to me it just really undercuts a lot of story. It's not interesting. It feels manufactured in order to give us some conflict. And again, I'm just not interested in it. Which is kind of a shame, because Ming-Na is awesome. I love sort of the chemistry, and I was curious, how are they going to do this? But even just the whole fight, that's what I'm saying, that whole fight with Enoch felt so empty, because I don't really feel like either one was going to be defeated in this. And ultimately, it just led to that moment with Phil coming out saying, May, stop! And she just has this, I don't know, like the Chronicoms, like Enoch himself, an unemotional, robotic reaction. You know, kind of an interesting response is, he was dead and he still is. You doubt, I mean, that sort of response and reaction, there's a bit of interest in there, but because of the emotional gun, it just, I don't know, it feels like story filler. And like I said, the show does character interaction really well. And this was just sort of an odd choice to do. It seems between season 5 and this, they're just trying to find reasons to not have these people reconnect or deal with things, but just sort of play with stuff in the background. And I just think it kind of teases the audience. I think it's a little cruel, to be perfectly honest. And I think it undercuts what these actors and writers can really do. So in kind of a yin and yang balancing act, while this episode does sort of create Freddy in that final face-off with him and Koenig, you don't know me, you don't know who I am, and he does that final strut out, sort of walking into Hydra, becoming Malik, the future head of Hydra. While that had to happen as well, another, again, balancing act in this does come with Koenig himself, who they lay very early on that this is going to be a reason why this family becomes so integrated in with S.H.I.E.L.D. and so well connected. And my favorite part of that is, of course, him getting on the ship and Patton Oswalt's beautiful, perfect reaction. It is why it's our Suit of the Week for this week. Like I said, not a whole lot of giant stuff in this episode. This was just one of those moments that I think was just fun. It was just a great reaction. And of course, I mean, it has the perfect setup where he's blindfolded and he's like, yeah, don't expect me to be all impressed with what you see. And just there, and a spaceship, and Earth, and here's the thing, because you can imagine what it would be like from the 1930s. Again, no, you don't have wireless, you did radios aren't there, you don't have televisions. I mean, you have radios, of course, at that time. I'm saying is your technology is very old. No television, no big stuff. Again, the whole wireless communication device with the CB was fancy tech for them, and now they're on the Zephyr. And obviously at that point, with the whole reveal of who everybody is, and they're from S.H.I.E.L.D., and they're sort of from the future, again, it's that perfect foundation topper of why Koenig and his family has become, so strong and integrated in with S.H.I.E.L.D. It was just, again, sort of a perfect moment, and it was a fun reaction watching Patton Oswalt just sort of jump around, looking and pointing at things, and just really seeing that reaction of somebody that has just walked into a sci-fi novel. You just walked into a UFO from people from the future. It was fun. It was a great moment. And that's why it's our Scene of the Week. All right, just a couple of small things. One, I didn't get a chance to say it last week, but I love the time-specific title cards. The ones they had last week, this week. Very classic, very film noir, very spy-oriented. It was awesome. And it's something that I'm hoping, now that we are jumping forward into time, that they are going to do with every visit, is change the title card into something very time appropriate. I think it's 60s that we're doing next, which would be kind of groovy and cool. 80s, we get the little flashiness, 90s, the edginess. I mean, depending on how many places they go. I just think it would be really fun to sort of see that. And it's going to be fun for the graphics department, too, to sort of get a chance to play with stylings throughout time. And one thing about time, specifically, slang is very time-specific. Fun watching Deke and Freddy sort of trade things off, both talking about the same thing, but using slang and terminology from two different eras. was very funny, was very cool. It is one of those problems that they don't talk about much in time travel school, is the importance of knowing language of the time. They do a great joke about that in the Jumanji, the first one of the remake, the first one with The Rock and Kevin Hart, when you know that the pilot is from back in the day when he's talking about getting jiggy with it and how fly the girls are. So automatically you know that that is not someone from this time period. So look, if you're going to time travel, just, do a little research on the slang and terminology. It'll go a long way. All right, they're getting purposely evasive with how long Gemma has been out developing things and traveling. Enoch used a considerable amount of time, I think now. So, yeah, years at least, possibly longer. Maybe Gemma is ancient and she just looks great because she knows how to do the science. I don't know. I'm just guessing that they seem to be implying that it's probably a bit longer than we think it might be. Yo-Yo can't do her thing! Why? Shrike stuff, I think they're saying. Maybe she's got some nerves. Unsure about something. Again, something we're probably going to dive into a little bit more. We'll be stretching this out. But it's just another one of those where it's like, oh, we've got someone unexpectedly hampered. Daisy's not using her powers that much. Some, but not a lot. Yo-Yo's not able to use her stuff. May is half out of it, totally out of it, sociopathic, sort of. I don't know, maybe she's replaced by a Chronicom? Probably not. I think Gemma would have been able to determine that. But anyway, so yeah, it's just kind of weird. We're hampering heroes in order to develop story and get drama going, and I think they could do more. Phil, continuing his nostalgia tour, got to go all gangster today with the fedora and Tommy gun. So, yeah, you know that Phil inside of him really having a blast. Oh, and, it's kind of interesting that the Chronicoms and the team, the agents, are stuck in the same kind of time countdown. Time countdowns, very natural stuff. Sliders had that years ago. Many other shows, there's always the countdown to the window when you can get out. And it sort of, again, puts extra pressure on top of everything that has to be done. We're going to be seeing a lot of that this season. But yeah, tying them in that they're also following the same thing is kind of cool. Part of it is like, well, is that the length of the window? Because as soon as it was about to close, the Chronicoms seemed to be like, well, guess no point chasing after Freddy there. I mean, he got away and the window's out, and that's the only time he can pull this thread. I don't know, again, non-specific about the rules, but it does sort of make it interesting with the two teams tied to the same time frame. In a way, because they are Chronicoms. So it's not like they really age, which is good for Enoch because that's why you can leave him. Remember, he waited all that time to wake up Fitz in the future. Of course, he died, and this is another version of Enoch that they came back to, so it's not this particular one. But still, waiting is part of a Chronicom's job. And he can spend all that time, obviously, getting Koenig up to speed and establishing the safe house and being Gemini, the tough guy behind the bar. Robot strong. I think they talked a little bit about that. So yeah, and of course he can just then meet up with the team when they return. I don't know if he can reach out to them, or I'm sure given the amount of time, Enoch would be able to figure some things out. So yeah, I mean, if we're going to leave somebody behind, he's the guy to do it. All right, now this is normally the part where I do fan questions. Starting to do a new thing. It's been kind of a crazy week. I tried to get to everybody, responded to everybody who was in the comment section. Thank you guys for all of that. Not hard to focus on doing the review and watching the show and kind of getting into that. But I think we all need breaks with the intensity. I haven't slept a whole lot. I've been paying attention to what's going on around the world in my cities across the country, trying to be supportive in the ways that I can. But it hurts. It hurts to see a lot of these things. It hurts to see people up against such monumental forces. Kind of like this. Sadly, a lot of the stuff we see on TV looks very similar to this. And it's not a totally incorrect analogy. Militarized national force, systemic racism. The Empire, blatantly racist, very pro-human, not like any other aliens. Versus a collection of people, citizens wanting to be heard, oppressed peoples that need to stand together with everyone in order to get their voices heard. And it's a crazy struggle. And I'm not trying to paint the police as bad guys, but a lot of them are. And more importantly, they're defending a system that suffers from the type of progress that the other side is looking for. It is in the interest of the police, of other powerful forces, to undercut the message that is trying to be peacefully but insistently presented to the world. And the world is listening. The world is marching with us. It is an amazing, beautiful time, but it's also one that is fraught with danger. Because you have unarmed masses standing against heavily armed forces that, again, suffer from the success of that message. There are people that will do whatever they can to blame and undercut and delegitimize what is happening. And what we can do is to lend our voices, to lend our ears, to lend our support as much as we can. Because it can go this way very easily. And we need to be aware that it can happen here. Where it happens, nobody says this is where it's going to happen and welcome that in. It happens. We have to stand together to fight it. And that's all I can say for now. So on that note, we'll go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you guys for listening to my little social commentary rant there. And as always, thank you for watching this review. Please share with your friends, like, subscribe, comment, do all these regular things. Remember, of course, this Friday, as we'll be doing throughout the season, we'll be doing Fans of S.H.I.E.L.D., 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. Live was so awesome. So many of you guys showed up and were there and part of the chat. Oh man, it made me feel so good. It was really heartwarming. So thank you so much. We will keep doing that. Loved all of your messages of support and encouragement. It was awesome. So thank you. Again, this Friday, 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern. Be there live if you can. If not, we'll be in the archives. So subscribe. That's the next thing. Oh, that's right. First, Twitter and Instagram. Find me at Darren Jakes. You'd think I'd remember to do all these things. Please be sure to subscribe so you can catch the rest of all of these reviews. Plus, of course, our live discussion of Fans of S.H.I.E.L.D. on Fridays. Do that by clicking this button right here. And we'll go ahead and throw up a couple of our latest reviews right here for you to check out. So, that's going to be it for me. I'm D, and I'm out of here. Catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.